Continuing with the layout of our two-bedroom condominium unit, this movie will look at many basic modification tools like move, copy, and trim. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of these modification tools. We're going to go to the Modify tab, and many of the tools we're going to look at are right here in the Modify panel. If you need to move a wall, for example, perhaps this wall is not in the correct location. We've already seen how we can do that in the temporary dimensions, but that's not the only way that we can do it. We can click on the Move tool, keyboard shortcut MV. What is different about this approach to doing it is it allows you to select a base point for your move and then move along and reference to a new point. So for example, if we know we wanted to move exactly the distance along this wall, we can use those reference points to indicate how far we want to move rather than having to type in numbers. So I could click here at this endpoint and I could move along that wall to this other endpoint. And what you'll notice there is Revit's pretty clever about the way it makes such a move because it continues to clean up the intersections at both ends of the wall, which is certainly very handy. Now, if I want to move a specific amount, I can also use the Move tool to do that. So I can click the Move tool, pick any point, begin moving in the direction that I'd like to move, and you can move in any direction, but in this case I'm going to move back horizontally, and then you simply type in the distance that you would like to move. In this case I'm going to move 2 foot 8 inches, and you press enter. When you do that, the same thing will occur. The object will move back, and in the case of walls, it will clean itself up. So pretty straightforward, but the two methods that you would use there is either type in a number or you would use 2 reference points. Now you can copy in the same fashion. It's almost identical approach. Copy tool is right next to move, and in this case, you select any old base point and you move to a new location. And you pick, and you'll, in this case, instead of moving the existing wall, it makes a copy of it. And then we could take that wall and we could use its grips and we could start making modifications to it. So if you knew what the dimension was off of this wall to the next one over here, that might be an approach you take. You might copy it first and then just reorient it. Now, another really handy tool is the Trim/Extend tool. So we're going to find that one over here in the toolbox as well. Now, it's actually broken down into 3 separate tools here. In the toolbox, we've got the Trim and Extend to a corner, we've got Trim and Extend to a single element, and we have Trim and Extend multiple elements. And so let's take a look at each one of these if we can here. So Trim and Extend to a corner basically allows you, in fact, if I pause for a minute here, you can kind of see the little movie running on the tooltip. It allows you to select 2 objects and join them up at a corner. So for example, in this location right here, I need to create a little coat closet. And actually the easiest way for me to do that is to simply select this wall and join it up with this wall. And you'll see the little virtual dashed line appear as it extends out and connects those 2 walls together. We'll talk about the really sharp corner there a little bit later. Again, if we want to look at a similar approach, perhaps we want this wall to come up to the virtual location here. Now, if I were to just use Trim and Extend to a corner, I'm actually going to get a real corner there. I'm going to undo that. If I want this wall to come up and stop here without the other one extending, I want to switch to one of these other Trim and Extend tools. So in this case, the first click is which object do I want to extend to, and in the next case, it's what do I want to extend. Now, I should point out with this tool, if I do it again this way, this tool can be either a trim or extend. So in that case, it was an extend. It made the wall longer. But if I choose this as a boundary edge and click here, it becomes more of a trim command, and it makes the wall shorter. How does Revit know that you wanted the condition I just had versus this condition? Okay, well, it knows because when you select, you pick the side of the wall that you want to keep. So if I select here and then here, it will extend out to that location. If I select here and click here, it's going to keep the part on the right. If I click here, it's going to keep the part on the left, like so. So depending on how you select your object, that's going to determine which condition you get. So pay attention to that when you use the Trim Extend tool. Okay, let's look at one more modification tool here in the Modify toolbox. Let's look at this one right here called Offset. It's another kind of a copy tool. It's going to allow us to create a copy of one of our existing walls, but we're going to be able to say what the parallel copy distance is, like how far we want this wall to copy next to itself. So I'm going to type in a dimension of 5 feet here, and then I'm able to come over here and highlight an existing wall, and I can thereby create the other side of my corridor here by just simply clicking on the first wall, and you'll see that Revit will automatically copy the neighboring wall next door to it. I use my trim and extend to a corner, and let's do this again very carefully here. I'm going to pick this one as the first one, but notice that I'll get something different if I click here than if I click here. I'm going to do it and then undo it. So I'm going to click here, and you'll see how I get that, versus if I click here. So you can see it's very different depending on which location you pick on the wall to get started with. I'm going to go ahead and make a few quick modifications here. I'm going to use the temporary dimension method to change the size of the living room. Notice that Revit will keep all the walls cleaned up if it's able to. In this case, it certainly was able to. Then I'm going to go ahead and add a small little closet in here, and I can fine-tune the dimensions of that later. And another small utility room in this location. And what I want to do now is I actually don't want one continuous wall here. What I want to do is get rid of this piece of the wall right in here. So Revit has a tool for that called Split. So let's go to Modify, and we'll look over here at the Split tool. Keyboard shortcut for that is SL. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to check this box here in the options bar. This will delete the inner segment. If you forget to check that, you'll end up with 3 separate walls there. So you'll split it at this location, and then you'll split it again at this location, and you'll have a wall, another wall, and another wall, and you can just come and delete the one in between. But if you remember to click Delete Inner Segment, Revit will do it for you. So I'm going to go ahead and select kind of in the center of that wall right there, and then come over here, and it's a little difficult to see, but there's a tiny gray line right there. I'm going to pause for a minute so that you can look for it, but there's a tiny gray line right there at my mouse showing me where it's going to split, and you'll see how it will delete the segment in between. So that's the Split tool, and that's a couple different modification tools. So you're certainly going to want to play with each one of the modification tools in this toolbox. You will use them not just for walls, you'll use them for any number of cases within your Revit environment while you're making modifications to geometry, and they really are staple tools for your modeling efforts.